It's an honor to be here this evening. Thank you for having me. Today I want to talk to you about barriers that are not the result of disadvantage or of accidents or of poor decisions. I want to talk to you about a different barrier, one that is a direct result of how our state and local governments regulate what people do for work, and how those barriers slam the doors to opportunity for many people in a very real way, and that we need to address them. And I hope I'll make that case to you through my story. In the African American culture, hair braiding is part of our makeup. It's in our DNA. Many people choose hair braiding as a way to style their hair, or a outlet for creativity, or a way that's functional for our hair. Many of you know how much easier it is to care for our hair when it's braided. Braiding has a rich history. It's a skilled tradition that has been passed down from one generation of women to another for the past 3,000 years of recorded history. Braiding is part of our story, particularly for women. As a little girl, my mother always braided my hair. It was a weekly ritual. It's what we did on Saturday nights before Sunday mornings. I sat in a chair in the kitchen, or I sat on the porch, or I sat on the floor between my mother's knees, and I got my hair braided. So picture it for a moment, because it was that simple and just the way it was for me and many other African American girls and mothers across our nation. Now, I studied psychology in college, and I worked for a few years in that field, helping to run a boys' home for troubled boys. But the more I worked and studied in that field, the more I dreamed of returning to the roots that had been so much a part of my history growing up and of so many other African American women. I dreamed of becoming an entrepreneur and opening and running my own hair braiding business. The dream got my adrenaline pumping. Now, on the other hand, my husband, and I quote, thought I had lost my mind for throwing aside that work study and experience and trying something new. But I didn't buy into all of that. For me, I simply went from working on the inside of one's head to working on the outside of one's head. Of course, I never braided professionally, let alone started, run, or open a business, but I thought, it's hair braiding, and I've been around hair my whole life. So seriously, how hard could this be? So I took some common sense steps. Step 1, learn how to braid professionally. Mother, no disrespect to you. So I found a master hair braider in Atlanta, Georgia. I traveled 300 miles from Tupelo, Mississippi, and I took a 2-day braiding class. I thought I shouldn't have to travel that far, but it's what I needed to do, so I did. Step 1, done. Step 2, practice the skills I had learned braiding on my mannequin until I felt comfortable enough to work on a live person. After 6 months of training on a mannequin, I was now confident enough to move forward. Step 3, find out what were the state and local requirements in Mississippi that would legally enable me to open my business. This is when my dream quickly began to turn into a nightmare. I discovered that in Mississippi, the government required anyone wanting to pursue hair braiding as a profession had to have a cosmetology license. So I found this interesting because the last time I checked, hair braiding was simply the interweaving of 3 or more strands of hair. freedictionary.com. Braiding has nothing to do with cosmetology, which is all about cutting hair, using chemically based products, doing makeup, doing nails, etc. My mother, my grandmother, and my great-grandmother all braided hair with no government oversight. But to form that But to form that tradition legally in Mississippi, I was going to have to do 3 things. Number 1, I was going to have to go to school for a year and a half. Number 2, I was going to have to obtain a 1,500-hour cosmetology license. And number 3, I was going to have to pay the state over $10,000. And this was going to be all in an area of training that had literally nothing to do with hair braiding. So I soon learned after all of this that I was not the only one in Mississippi that this was being required of, that across the state, many states and local governments required would-be braiders to obtain a cosmetology license, and many times requiring that they obtain a license that was over 2,000 hours worth of training. That actually calculates to be over a year and a half worth of training, taking 40 hours of classes that literally have nothing to do with hair braiding. And that was a lot of time and a lot of money to be spent. Now, the vast majority of women who would be pursuing hair braiding didn't have that type of money or that type of time. As a matter of fact, I didn't even have that type of money. And I was in a much better financial position than many of the young women who would be pursuing this profession. And to make matters worse, in order to obtain a license to teach hair braiding in Mississippi, the government would require me to take an additional 3,200 hours of classes, all again in courses that has nothing to do with braiding. Now, in the 3,200 classroom hours it would have taken me to obtain a license to teach braiding, I could have become licensed in all of the following occupations in Mississippi. Here we go. Emergency medical technician, basic. Emergency medical technician, paramedic. Ambulance driver. Police officer. Firefighter. Real estate appraiser. And hunting education instructor. Now listen, I realize this is DC, but I'm from Tupelo, and in Mississippi, there are hunting education instructors. And all of those occupations, not just one of those occupations, but all of those occupations, I could have did them all and still had 600 hours left over. So I thought, you know, this is crazy. Who could be behind all of this? So I found out it was the Board of Cosmetology, their establishment. They were the ones who were behind all of this. You had to go to cosmetology school in order to obtain these licenses. So anyone who was wanting to braid hair as a profession would have to go to a cosmetology school. And what this meant for cosmetology schools is that cosmetology schools would be guaranteed students, right? And once they were guaranteed students, then basically these students became captive customers. And so anyone wanting to do this, there was no way that you could get around it. You had to go to a cosmetology school, you had to take the training, you had to pay for the training in order to become licensed. And who was on the State Board of Cosmetology? You guessed it. Practicing cosmetologists, not natural hair braiders. And I had to make a decision after that. Either give up on my dreams of becoming an entrepreneur or fight back against the status quo. I decided to fight back. So I joined with the Institute for Justice, who represented me free of charge, filing a lawsuit to break down the regulatory walls barring aspiring entrepreneurs from entering the field. That set in motion weekly trips to the state capital, Jackson, a 7-hour round trip from Tupelo, Mississippi. This was all new to me, and you know what? I didn't want to fight anyone, especially the government. You know, all I wanted to do was to pursue my dream of becoming an entrepreneur. All I wanted to do was to earn an honest living for my family and all I wanted to do was help other women in my shoes do the same. But the more I became involved, the more I realized quickly that this fight was not just about me, that it affected other people as well. It affected Nina Lyons, who had braided hair all of her life, and after finishing high school, decided she wanted to open and start her own braiding salon, only to be told no by the state of Mississippi unless you go to school first and obtain a cosmetology license and pay over $10,000. Nina didn't have that type of money, and besides, she wasn't gonna learn anything again in her field of braiding. I met Nina when she was 35 years old. She had long given up on her dream as becoming a hair braider. And guess what? Nina settled for working in a furniture factory, sewing furniture. It affected Ebony Starks, who was 16. Her dad had died suddenly to illness, and she was faced with having to find part-time work to help her mother pay some of the bills. It affected mothers who wanted to work, but they had children and they didn't have childcare. It also affected college students who wanted to earn money on the side, making extra money braiding hair just to work their way through college. It affected the teenage mom who had dropped out of school. In 2005, our efforts paid off. Mississippi's governor signed legislation enabling hair braiders to be free of the burdensome mandated regulatory laws. We won. But let me tell you, it wasn't that easy. Many times I wanted to give up. I thought to myself, is this all worth it? I mean, taking weekly trips to the state capitol, 1 to 3 days out of a week, spending time away from my family, trying to convince legislatures of a subject that many of them were clueless about, and probably some of them could even care less about. But you know what? It brings me to a story. I remember one day my attorney and I were about to go into a health and sanitation meeting. We were a bit nervous about this committee meeting this day because had our bill been voted against, it would have put us in a losing position. So this is a true story. I'm not making this up. Another reason why we were nervous because an argument had been raised by the Health and Sanitation Committee that if hair braiders were allowed to practice without a license, an AIDS epidemic could break out. I'm telling you, this is a true story. So just as my attorney and I were standing there, this was very intense, as we were standing there waiting to go into this meeting, this gentleman appeared out of nowhere. It was like he just came out of the shadows. And he walked up to us, he introduced himself, and he said, I've been following your bill, and I believe I have some information that will help you going forward. He then handed my attorney and I a stack of papers. As we read the headlines on the paper, our eyes almost popped out of our heads. The headline read, "Tattoo artists are not licensed in Mississippi." It then went on to give some facts about what was involved in tattooing and some of the side effects. I mean, things like needles, blood, infections, all of which don't involve natural hair braiders. We knew that we had a powerful tool in our hand, and as we passed that out to each senator that entered that meeting that day, we knew that we had their attention, and all of them passed our bill. The only requirements today are that hair braiders in Mississippi must pay a $25 fee and register with the State Board of Health and abide by basic health and sanitation guidelines. So fast forward to today. In Mississippi today, over 3,000 people are registered in Mississippi as hair braiders, and they now are now able, where they weren't able to before, provide for themselves and for their families. I was able to hire Nina Lyons. She actually was able to see her dreams come true. Ebony Starks, who was 16 when I hired her, is now 25. She was able, through the money she earned through hair braiding, to help her mother through difficult times. And guess what? Today, she still works in the salon, and she's now providing for her own family. I've gone on to teach hundreds of individuals how to braid hair. No longer am I stopped from government regulations from putting industrious individuals to work. I literally have gone on and did other things. I've opened Armstrong Academy, which is a braiding school. I've been able to establish MELONY Armstrong coaching and consulting. So guess what, you all? I'm just one hair braider in Tupelo, Mississippi, who just happened to make one simple change in the law. It only needed to be one tweak in the law. And that one tweak in the law has affected thousands of women in Mississippi. And as a matter of fact, not only in Mississippi, but in Alabama, because they have since passed laws. In Arkansas, they have since passed laws. In Texas, they have since passed laws. In Utah, they have since passed laws as well. So what am I saying here? I think we need to take a serious look at the regulatory walls that are barring entrepreneurs from making an honest living. You know, I think about the Nina Lyons, and I think about the Ebony Starks, and who knows, there may be 10,000, 100,000, even 1 million Nina Lionses out there. We owe it to our citizens to pay attention to these laws that do nothing but keep entrepreneurs out. I wish that we would take a serious look and consider what we're doing. America was built on the back of entrepreneurs. I think many people would agree that. We need entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs made America great. And if we could do it in Mississippi, we can do it across the nation. Thank you.